Done. Cool. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Serge. And James is frozen.
And my name is James.
And you've unfrozen. Today is Throwback Thursday, James. A chance to look back. Yeah. A chance to look back at some old football from the 90s, from the 2000s, and kind of reminisce a little bit about the days of tight shorts and what have you. If anybody hasn't figured out my background, it's Carrow Road. Why is my background Carrow Road, James?
Because we are going to be talking about Norwich City, basically from a period of 1992 to a little bit of 94-95, but mainly that 92-93 season. Just to clarify what you said there on shorts, the Premier League kind of got into a change of shorts. People finally got into baggy shorts. It was a big change from 91-92 to 92-93. Baggy shorts were suddenly in, thank goodness.
They were getting bigger. They definitely were.
I mean, they were like Speedos the season before, mate. When you look back on it, it's remarkable that players didn't rip their shorts very regularly. I mean, you can look back at like Italia 90, European Championships 1992. The shorts for many of the teams were so short. And with the Premier League came baggier shorts. I don't know. Some people might think that wasn't a good thing. Personally, I do.
Nah. To be honest, with baggier shorts, it'd have been easier for Gary Lineker when he shot himself, wouldn't it, really? I'm pretty sure he did that with the tight shorts on, didn't he?
He definitely had the tight shorts on in Italia 90. I remember we were playing schoolboy football in the mid-90s. And I remember you used to get like a PE kit. It was like, you used to play for the school football team and that. And I remember playing in a game and I suddenly shot up in growth. And these shorts were so short. And my mum, it was a London Cup semi-final, a Middlesex Cup semi-final. And I remember my mum and dad took the afternoon off work to come and watch me play. And my mum was like, "What are you wearing, son?" Like, you look terrible.
Oh, wicked. Those were the days.
That would have been in 95, and I'd have been about 11 or 12. Yeah.
So 90, 92, 93, 93, 94 was the UEFA Cup season, and 94, 95 is when it started dwindling away for Norwich City.
Well,
you mentioned a few things about.
It started dwindling in that 93, 94 season.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously the UEFA Cup was a real distraction from the league potentially that year. You mentioned these couple of seasons. Now, my memory is all right from back in the day, but it's nothing like yours, or maybe a lot of listeners will be closer to me in terms of memories. But when I started looking back at the season, the 92-93 season, it was what you'd really call a stats. What do they call them in FPL? A stats breaker, stats buster.
A stat buster. Stat buster.
Completely.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I mean,
the final result.
The reality here is, to sum up, is that before Norwich played Manchester United with only about 6 games to go, they were top of the league and they finished the season with a minus goal difference. That's astonishing. They could have won the league, mate, with a minus goal difference. Can you imagine? They finished third with a -4 goal difference. I think they were the romantic story of that first Premier League season. We could call them retro Leicester, if you like.
Yeah.
Even going back to the shirt, which obviously people will know Norwich's kit was yellow. You remember when you were a kid and you used to throw paint at like a sheet or something? Yeah. The Norwich kit looked like someone had just thrown some dashes of green and white paint on these yellow kits. And actually it's become, at the time it was like, what is that? But it's become very iconic. A couple of other clubs had similar kits. I think Coventry had something similar as well. And it was a very romantic story what happened with Norwich, because obviously the Premier League went boom with Super Sunday, Monday night football, it all going on to Sky, and the money that started coming in. Everybody was converting into all-seater stadiums. Norwich were, at the time, redeveloping yours. Those on YouTube who can see the main stand behind you, that's only been built for about 10 years or so. But Norwich were redeveloping the two ends behind the goal, which used to be single-tier stands, and then both become what they are now, which is double-tier all-seaters. went into the season as basically as one of the relegation favourites. It was a 22-team league. And on the eve of the season, they sold their best player. Yep. They start forward, Robert Fleck, for just over $2 million to Chelsea. Our friend's FPL Badger, our Norwich correspondent, told me that Fleck is probably still his favourite ever Norwich player. He was a very, very good goal scorer, who then went on to score only 4 goals for Chelsea. And his career was done, basically. Just how it goes sometimes. Yep. Norwich used half the money to replace him with Efe Nkoku from Bournemouth and Mark Robbins, who once famously apparently saved Sir Alex Ferguson's job at Manchester United in a game at Nottingham Forest in a cup third round in 1990. So they'd lost their best player. They'd finished the previous season with 8 games without a win, which culminated with a final day defeat at champions Leeds United. They were one of the hot favourites to go down.
And went on to win their first 6 games then in the end.
It was 4 wins, a draw, and a defeat from the first 6.
Okay.
And I can remember...
They were top of the table at that point, right?
Yeah, after 6 games, after they beat Nottingham Forest game 6 on a Monday Night Football, which is one from the archives. It's a cracking little game of football. But I remember that game week 1 very well because obviously it was the launch. I was at the Dell,
right,
watching Tottenham at Southampton, Labour to a 0-0. And obviously in those days, all you used to get was the half-time scores, right? Mm-hmm. No mobile phones, any shit like that.
No, nothing like that.
Southampton used to have a screen behind the goal on the away end that put the half-times up. Comes up half-time, Arsenal 2, Norwich 0. Standards. It's what you expected. Arsenal had finished the previous season well and were going in as one of the favourites for that league with sort of Man United, Leeds and that. And obviously come out the ground and it's like Norwich have won 4-2 at Arsenal. What's happened there? So Robbins came on, who I think he'd only signed for Norwich the previous day.
Yep.
Came on at half-time, scored. It was 2-2. Rolf Fox got a third. Mark Robbins scored quite an iconic chip for the 4th. And suddenly they've won 4-2 at Highbury opening day and shocked everyone. Okay, that's interesting. Then game week 2, they go 1-0 down at home to Chelsea. And we must say this is not Chelsea like now. Chelsea, a very average side. Came back and won that 2-1. They also came back from a goal down to get a draw against Everton in game week 3. Then there was a fallback at Manchester City, but then they had an amazing run of 5 wins in a row. Away to Palace, home in that Forest fixture. 1-0 at home to Southampton, Sheffield Wednesday. And another game people might remember, which was a Monday night game, a 3-2 win at Oldham, and Mark Robbins got a hat-trick. And so at that point, they're absolutely flying, mate. They've got 7 wins, a draw and a defeat from their first 9. We got to start taking them seriously.
It literally was a case of, it's similar to Kevin Keegan's Newcastle 4-3s, right? I think the quote from the manager at the time was, you get 3 points for a 4-3, you get 1 point for a 0-0. So if we win every game this season 4-3, I'll take it.
That was the attitude. They conceded over 60 goals. If you concede 60 goals in the Premier League now, there's every chance you might go down, mate. They conceded over 60 goals and finished third, mate. They then had a draw at Coventry in their 10th game. The older listeners might remember a magical goal that Peter and Love scored for Coventry in that fixture. And then came what was not the first shellacking of the season. They went to Blackburn Rovers, newly promoted with Messrs Shearer, etc. Got absolutely slapped 7-1 at Ewood Park.
Yeah.
And then you think,
reality.
They're in trouble here.
Yeah.
They come back, they beat QPR in the next game. Then another shellacking, 4-1 at Liverpool. And there was a theme of this. There was some big defeats. If you look at the results throughout the season, they lost, obviously, 3-1 at home to Manchester United, 3-0 at Wimbledon, 3-1 at QPR, 3-0 at Southampton. And I remember playing them on Good Friday, which was the game after they lost to Manchester United in April, which kind of finished the title challenge. And we just lost to Arsenal in the FA Cup semi-final. We beat them 5-1 and we absolutely destroyed them. On a very wet Good Friday. We could have got 6, 7, 8 easily, destroyed them. But yet, this team just kept coming at you. And they were prepared to know that they were going to have plenty of games where they were going to take a slapping.
Yeah.
Because they were going to win several games. By the odd goal, I mean, that Oldham fixture, for example, was a 3-2 following on from a 3-2 victory at Chelsea. They won 4-2 at Arsenal. They won 3-2 at Aston Villa. Aston Villa had finished second that year, and for a long period looked like they were going to win it as well. So there was some high-scoring games that they were involved in, and a lot of people got behind it because they were fun to watch, right?
Yeah, and we do like it when teams go and have a go. I mean, I was thinking the way you're describing the season, a lot of people might think that Norwich over the season must have had very few draws because they've either won 2/3 of their games and then gone and lost a handful, but the ones that they've lost, they happen to have lost particularly heavily. But it's nothing like it. I mean, looking at the league table now, they played 42 games. They won 21, so they only won half. No one who wins half their games in a season is going to be near the top half of the table nowadays. It wasn't quite, but you know what I mean? Up the top 6 or what have you. And then I think, Aston Villa, who finished above them, won exactly the same number of games. It wasn't like Villa won any more or less. So if they've lost a lot of games and they didn't win very many, you'd expect a lot of draws, or maybe fewer draws than some of the other teams around them. It's all pretty much of a much. They drew 9 games over the season.
12.
Yeah. So I suppose that the way that their results were, I think they were just extremes within the matches, right? If they were losing, they were losing big. If they were winning, they'd have to score 3 or 4 just to win some games. Although you did mention quite a few cheeky 1-0s in there as well.
Well, what's interesting about it, you talk about the number of defeats that Norwich side had. Obviously, the next year they slid down the table, finishing in the bottom half. They only lost 1 more game.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was converting those draws into wins. We spoke on last Thursday's podcast about obviously the amount of draws that Manchester United and Leeds had. And it was a recurring theme in the Premier League at that time that there were a lot more draws than there are now.
Why do you think that was?
I just think style of football was probably a little bit easier to defend against, if I'm very honest. You get more variations in terms of style, tactics, etc. Very much then you would have, most teams were playing 4-4-2, weren't they, with one direct target man into the flanks, get it up to the big man, knockdowns, etc.
Yeah, I noticed a lot in terms of the videos that I watched. It was a crosses coming into the box. That seemed to be the thing. Crosses coming into the box, and centre halves in those days were just big, strong centre halves. So you would be able to just clear it. And if you had a good day, you got your head on most things, you stood a good chance of a clean sheet.
Well, crossing generally in football has become very much a dying art. I think actually one of the people who kind of revolutionised that a little bit in this country really was Wenger. In terms of the way people like Perez and Lundberg, rather more looking for new sort of Omri and Anelka, were not regularly going to be diving heading the thing in the back of the net. So we're regularly looking for pullbacks. Yeah. And obviously Arsenal had a very successful period in the late 90s and early 90s and kind of evolved the way football was played so much. You compare with, say, United at the same time with Giggs and Beckham, was 2 completely different styles, wasn't it? But no one really is playing that way now, and except for really, you could say Liverpool, but it's evolved to what it is now.
Yeah, I mean,
it comes from the fullbacks.
You can't compare Trent's crossing ability or what he does when he's crossing the ball with what this is, getting to the byline and whipping it in. His are from the halfway line, cross field, man coming on the back stick kind of stuff. I suppose you could say that Manchester City with Sterling and Sane finding each other on opposite ends was a little bit like crossing, but they're not
to the extent that we would have seen in the early 90s. I
would love to see, if Sterling and Sane have created so many goals for each other, I wonder how many of those goals are headed. Wouldn't surprise me if it was like less than 5, because these crosses are almost to feet, right?
Not many.
Yeah,
not many. The only one who really gets headed goals is the 2 actual central strikers, Aguero and Jesus. Anyway, that's very off topic. Norwich obviously did have a target man who they could use in that way in Chris Sutton, who would later move on and break the British transfer record going to Blackburn in the summer of 1994. And what they had, which a lot of people had, was a very direct winger, Norwich, in Raw Fox, who would later go on to Newcastle. You probably see the sort of theme that's going on here. Ikoko was emerging. It was a kind of a budget signing from Bournemouth. He would later go on to Wimbledon. Mark Robbins would move on to Leicester. this team eventually broke up, essentially. They were a team of, let's say, no superstars, but a good football team. So 3 of the back 4 essentially were rejects from Tottenham, basically. Reject is harsh, but they didn't really make it. Mark Bowen at left back was a very good footballer, played a number of games for Wales. John Polston was also at Spurs, was the mainstay of that Spurs side. And Ian Culverhouse, who played at right back, had also played for Spurs. Had a good goalkeeper in Brian Gunn, who terribly during this season lost his daughter to leukemia. And carried on playing, basically. Yeah, really sad. In midfield, obviously, as mentioned, got Fox on the right. David Phillips, who played on the left, was a very good footballer, good striker of ball. And Ian Crook was generally the sitting midfield player who orchestrated everything. He was also a former Spurs player. Very good technically. Mobility-wise, didn't get around the pitch in the way modern-day footballers were, but he could play. He was the dictator of the tempo. And people obviously think about this Norwich team and think of Jeremy Goss. But actually, it wasn't until the next season that Goss started going mad. He only got the 1 Premier League goal that season. And he was regularly competing for a midfield place with Gary Megson, who had been brought in also. So, you know, it was what it was. Some of its parts, it didn't rotate too much. You had people often, like Daryl Such, got an important winner at Aston Villa early in the season. But it didn't change much in comparison to what you see with rotation these days. They were a team, and they just had a little bit like Leicester, mate. It just had that one incredible season.
Yeah, I mean, Leicester have gone on to stay in and around the top 6 of the table consistently, and I think it just goes to show, like, if you're an emerging team like that, you not only do you need to have a season out of your skin, but the rest of the table was not particularly good in that year either. The likes of Liverpool and Arsenal and what have you were just not the teams that they are now. So it was a combination both of Norwich being out of their skin and the rest of the league not being where it needed to be.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely spot on. United obviously won it quite comfortably in the end, but the other clubs that the pre-season would have expected to challenge, Arsenal, Liverpool, obviously Leeds, as we've mentioned last week's pod, champions, didn't win a single away game, were miles off. So it came down to United, Villa and Norwich. And every time it kind of looked like Norwich had kind of sunk away and blown their chance, like in December, they had a big game at United on the 12th of December, which they lost 1-0. Then they lost at home to their rivals, Ipswich. They actually lost to Ipswich home and away. Ipswich were one of the better sides that season in the Premier League, actually. And then they drew with Spurs, drew with Leeds, and then lost at Sheffield Wednesday. And then there was a home draw at Coventry. And then I remember my Spurs went there in the 4th round of the Cup and outplayed them again in the second half and won 2-0. And you think, right, that's it. They're finished. And then they put together another remarkable run to put them back top for April. And as Mark had said to me sort of offline, he said at that point, the feeling was around them was that if they beat Manchester United, they would probably go on and win it.
Yeah.
Because they'd gone into the previous weekend, they played Villa to go back top, and Villa were the other team competing. They beat Villa 1-0. And at that point, people really started believing. It's like, wow, there's 6 games to go. If you beat Manchester United as well, then you're in with a chance on the running, right?
There was some small prize for finishing 3rd that season, which was European football the season after. And looking at the highlights of it, you can see the atmosphere. You know, like when some of these, no disrespect calling them a smaller club, get these European nights, the place is rock. You look at Molineux now when they're getting their European football, the atmosphere looks incredible. That atmosphere for the second leg against Bayern Munich just sounded incredible.
Yeah, do you know what? It is one of them things I would recommend go and get yourselves on YouTube and have a look at them, because you can hear women screaming like every time Bayern attack and stuff. It's really good. It's brilliant. It's a proper throwback. And there's some legends in that Bayern Munich side, like Mateus.
He's but probably,
even how they got to the UEFA Cup was a little bit of a drama in itself as well. So they actually only ended up finishing 3rd by 1 point in the end. They lost to United. Obviously, United, basically, they played a high line against United, and Man United were 3-0 up in 20 minutes, destroyed them with the pace of Chelsea and Lee Sharp. Then they got battered at Spurs, as I said. Then they beat Leeds. Then they lost to Ipswich again. They took 4 points from their last 2 to assure their place of finishing third ahead of Blackburn Rovers. They beat Liverpool 1-0. And then on the final day against an already relegated Middlesbrough, they led 1-0, went 2-1 down, went 3-2 up, drew 3-3, and finished third by a point. Obviously, they had a far worse goal difference than Blackburn as well. So that didn't necessarily definitely get them in. You didn't have as many European places as what you have now. So they still needed Arsenal to win the FA Cup for them to get into Europe as well. And that took a replay, an extra time, and a 119th minute goal from a former Norwich player, no less, in Andy Linegan, that got them into the UEFA Cup. They played Dutch side, Vitesse Arnhem, in the first knockout. It was no group stage.
Yep.
Won the first leg 3-0 at home. Should have added to that in the second leg, but drew 0-0. And then came this glorious result in Munich against Bayern Munich, which, I mean, obviously because the European Cup then was still only, or what people know as the Champions League, was only the league winners. The UEFA Cup used to get bloated with some incredible football teams, as judged by 2 of the 3 teams that Norwich played on their run, right?
Am I right in thinking that was Norwich's first season in Europe? Or first
to my knowledge only.
Yeah. So their 3rd European game ever, you're away in Bayern Munich. Incredible.
Yeah, the 5th not wasn't like bad either.
But it's like, just when I was listening to the commentary and he said, yeah, it's their 3rd ever game. And you're like, your 3rd Europe, stuck in amongst that. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they had a European tour that a lot of people could have 10 years of European tours and not get to the stadiums they got to.
Yeah.
So obviously it wasn't the Allianz that people will know now. It was the,
no.
I guess, more famous Olympic Stadium, where obviously the World Cup final was in 74, where England beat Germany 5-1. Very iconic stadium that got left into a bit of a decrepit state, actually. But Bayern, nobody won there. Norwich became the first English side ever to win away to Munich. The first goal was scored very iconically by Jeremy Goss, who had a season of glorious, incredible volleyed goals, which culminated in his one only goal from the previous season. He was the last ever player to score in front of the Kop at Anfield as well, with a screamer, which is one that he can take away, but will most fondly be remembered for this brilliant volley away to Bayern Munich, where he runs onto it. He just doesn't break his stride and gets up. He's like a poor man's Di Canio against Wimbledon, if you like. Nowhere near as good, but a worldie of a goal that he runs onto it and hits the volley.
Keeper was just standing still.
Got no chance.
He didn't make much of an effort, but yeah, he probably had no chance. You're right.
And Bayern probably weren't used to playing against the likes of Chris Sutton, who basically just by sheer presence caused the distraction on the second goal from, I think it was a free kick played in by Ian Crook, and Mark Bowen got round the back from full back and headed in the second. And look, it was grim. It was grim for them to hang on, but they did. And the second leg was also grim in terms of its nerves. But Goss scored again to cancel out an early goal from Bayern Munich, and they went through 3-2 on aggregate. And it's a beautiful little story. And then obviously it's Inter Milan in the San Siro next, right? How good is that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible for them. Incredible little run.
They lost 1-0 at home to a Bergkamp penalty, and then chasing the game, Bergkamp also scored the only goal in the second leg in the San Siro, and they went out 2-0 on aggregate. But yeah, you only ever played 3 games in European competition, and you played in the Olympic Stadium in Munich and the San Siro in Milan. Any Norwich fan who went out there, like, those are the best days of your life, right?
Yeah, it's good. They're
not taking
really
that away.
No, of course not.
And that was the prize for their amazing season the previous year. Obviously, now they could have had a Champions League group like that, right? But to get those sides in the UEFA Cup was fantastic for them, and memories that they'll keep forever. And then straight after that second leg against Milan in the San Siro, Mike Walker jumped ship, went to Everton. And for both clubs, it fell apart, not just Norwich, because Mike Walker very nearly took Everton down. The story of Mike Walker is basically he was promoted as youth team coach prior to the 1992 season. It was his first job. And he obviously had a great 18 months. And then Everton poached him. and Everton fans shudder at the thought of his name, and ended up hating him because he jumped and it kind of ruined the legacy a little bit. And then from there, Norwich really struggled. They only won 2 league games in 93-94, following a New Year's Day win against Southampton when they were 7th when Walker walked out on them. And then the following year, 4 teams went down as the Premier League reverted to 20 teams. They finished 20th and went down. And it was 9 years before they'd returned with the likes of Darren Huckabee, etc.
Very interesting time for the club that we kind of had a little bit of a look back at. I mean, it's funny to think. I think we're both wise enough and clever enough now to say that it's not one of those stories that will never happen again. There's going to be teams that are going to break through. It is going to happen again. You could say that Wolves, not too dissimilar in terms of how they took the Premier League by storm last year and have gone into Europe this year. Not quite to the same extent, but football's different now as well. But I think we are seeing more and more teams that come up having a good go. Look at Sheffield United this year, having a real go at it, mixing up with some of the bigger teams. We're going to see another story like this again.
But even if you can compare those two clubs to a lesser extent, Sheffield United, because it's going back slightly further, but both, Sheffield United had a history of being in cup finals.
You're right.
Wolves have won plenty of league titles. You think of the Billy Wright team in the 50s and stuff like that. So there's historical stuff. There's nothing in Norwich's history. Norwich's history is a 1985 League Cup final win against Sunderland. It's unremarkable. But obviously, catchment area-wise, they're really interesting because Norwich and Ipswich, there's a good distance between the two places.
There is.
Essentially, then down from Ipswich, it's a long run down to London. Interestingly, for Norwich fans, for them to go north, quite often they have to get a train into London and then back up north.
Yep.
So away journeys are normally an absolute nightmare for them. They're a very well-supported club. I think you can see even this season they've done things with the atmosphere, with the displays before games, etc. I think it's always been thought of, and it's the same for Ipswich actually, as a nice place to go. I don't know if it's just because what we think of English as that part of the world in East Anglia, and that we think everyone's quite friendly, don't we? I think when they play each other, it's anything but.
You'll have heard me on the show talk about a few mates that Gareth, our pal, used to work with us down here, is up there, and a few of the Norwich fans. My mate Hud, who lives actually up in Cheshire, but travels back to every home game at Carrow Road, still a season ticket holder. I did ask a couple of them actually what memories from 92, 93, if any, because it's a long time ago. But he popped up with Rule Fox was his real kind of standout player from the time. And another mate of ours, Andy, at the time, he grew up in Norwich. He said to me that he grew up in Norwich, but as a Liverpool fan. And what he remembers from the time was all his Norwich fans taking the piss out of him being a Liverpool fan because they were going to go on to win the league and then them screwing it up. And now it might come back full circle because the way things are going, Liverpool ain't going to get the title.
I'd just like to add my own memories a little bit on Rule Fox, who you mentioned there. So he went to Newcastle. I think he might have played for England once or twice. He was certainly in a few squads. And then obviously Keegan's team started pushing close to the title, didn't they?
Yeah.
And he started buying in people like Ginola and that. So Rule Fox become surplus to requirements, basically. And Spurs bought him. I think it was his 3rd game. He played Arsenal in the North London derby at Tottenham, and he absolutely destroyed Nigel Winterburn. I thought that, oh my God, we've got an absolute bargain here. He just ran at him every single time. He was the best player on the pitch. We won 2-1. And in the 5 years following, I don't think he played well for Spurs again.
One hit wonder. But if you could take a one hit wonder for Spurs, it'd be against Arsenal.
Oh yeah, I remember him for that game. He was the best player on the pitch. That's 95-96 that season. He created the equaliser for Sheringham, and he tore them. But he had a handful of good games after that. He just disappeared. I don't know what happened. He was very good at Norwich. Norwich was the peak of his career. Chris Sutton was obviously interesting because although he was bought by Blackburn for $5 million a couple of years later, in the run up to this season, the people at the club say they still didn't know if he was a forward or a defender. He played as many games at centre half as he did at centre forward. So Sutton's another one not really remembered from that season. Mark Robbins was the one. I think he's got 15 league goals, 16 all comps. was the one particularly early in the season was the one who was the main source for goals. They were a good football team. They had a nice little balance.
Nice. There we go, James. A little cheeky throwback Thursday for everybody that that has tuned in and listened to this show. We still have this week a live stream from you tomorrow.
Well, another one.
If you didn't tune into James's 2-hour live stream yesterday around the Championship Manager game, Champman FPL 102, you might want to tune back on YouTube if you want to. I mean, it's 2 hours and the game's done now, so maybe not, for a bit of banter. Why don't you?
A few people told me that they couldn't watch the stream last night, so we're going to turn their phones off and do the match of the day challenge. Watching my stream.
Incredible. But James got another for you tomorrow on Friday, so do stay tuned for that. Another full week of content next week, James.
Yeah, it looks like they want me to stream Saturday as well. So I would have ruled that out.
Whilst in isolation.
Yeah, ask James Friday. We'll see about Saturday. Back to full content next week. We haven't decided on topic-wise what we're doing. I'll probably look at something from 93, 94, I guess, for the Thursday throwback. We do know Tom Campbell is going to do the quiz for us next Wednesday. So we'll see if I'm as clever as I make out.
Touch wood, the People's Poll will be a non-European Premier League 11 of all time.
It could be, actually. You're quite right.
Touch wood. So maybe we do know what we're doing next week.
Possibly, maybe. But they've still got to vote for it, Suj.
Yes, indeed. Right, it's time for me to go home, James.
All right, it's time for me to do something else. Maybe edit this, probably.
I'm home now.
No.
That's what I meant. I'm done in Carrow Road now.
For the benefit of those on the audio, Suj has had a background up at Norwich City. He's just changed it to West Ham United.
There we go.
Boo.
Yeah. To all the listeners that have tuned in.
Going down with the Norwich. The Norwich.
I think the season's going to be voided, mate. For all the listeners.
Have you seen the breaking news in Belgium?
No.
Literally just before we started recording, season's finished.
Wow.
Bruges champions.
Oh, but they've won the title. But were they mathematically clear?
Well, yes and no. So they were 15 points clear, but actually the Belgium League finishes with a playoff, very similar to Rugby League Super League, to determine the champions. So obviously that playoff's not going to happen. There was one game to go. They've called it void and they've said, like, Bruges champions. I don't know how they're going to work out European spots and relegation and that, but I don't know if it's confirmed, but I think that's the assumption. But yeah, Belgium season cancelled. It could be the first,
definitely be a topic of conversation on Monday's main.
Belgium is down the road, mate, basically, in terms of planet.
Yeah, that is true. So everybody that's been tuning in, interacting on Twitter, listening to the show, sharing it and giving us feedback, we really do appreciate it during this time. I mean, we're still trying to keep everybody entertained as best we can. I know it's difficult with everything that's going on. So thank you for all of that. Do share the podcast. And if you found it entertaining, interesting, listening with any people that you think might want to come and join the Planet FPL family. Other than that, you're not going to see me before the weekend. Have a great weekend. You'll see James before the weekend. Ciao for now.
Cheers, Captain. Be nice to each other. Cue music, man child.